It's well known that cell phones can track your location, but you may not have ever considered it a national security risk. In 2016, a U.S. defense contractor, Planet Risk, made that startling discovery when it was working on a software prototype. The risk analytics company found it could track military operations through the apps on American soldiers' mobile devices. As you can imagine, the revelation created a national security challenge for the armed forces. Byron Tau writes for the Wall Street Journal and was the first to report on this story, and he joins us now to discuss how severe of a threat this discovery is to our national security. Byron, good to see you, my friend. So tell us how employees at Planet Risk came to realize that they could monitor U.S. military operations, and what kind of a threat is this information being out there pose for our troops? I think anybody who's ever watched a movie kind of knows that you can track people through a phone, and if you had asked me before I read your story, I would have guessed that it would be the same for soldiers, but why is this sort of like a revelation for the DoD?
Thanks for having me. So this company, Planet Risk, was trying to build this tool that would essentially look at the flow of refugees from Syria to elsewhere in the world. So Europe and America were the primary hotspots. And as they were looking at data in Syria, they could see some very strange things. They could see some phones that were transiting from known military facilities in the United States, were transiting through third-party countries like Canada or Turkey, and then would cluster at this munitions, or actually it was a cement factory in northern Syria, and then go sort of out on patrol outside and around this factory. So their guess, and they were later proven correct, was that this was evidence of sensitive U.S. missions buried in this data that was drawn from apps. So the kind of apps that everyone puts on their phone: weather, games, food delivery services, all these apps that ask to track your location. They also collect that and sell it to data brokers, and that data goes everywhere, including to a defense contractor that was looking at this stuff to build a surveillance tool.
I thought your article was really fascinating. And one of the things I kept on saying was, this really should not have been a surprise to the U.S. government. And Vlad kind of said that too. The U.S. government tracks terrorists and criminals with commercial data obtained without a warrant. This company was trying to track refugees who are private citizens. So I'm curious about the government's response once they learned that, hey, American troops are using some of these same apps and also could be tracked.
So this is something the military has been grappling with for a couple of years now, and I think it was eye-opening for them back in 2016. There was also an episode in 2018 where the fitness app Strava released sort of a global map of running routes, and that showed the layout of all these unannounced U.S. military facilities. So this is something that the military has been aware of for some time. And they've put into place policies that if soldiers are forward deployed, so they're outside the United States, they're in a sensitive area, they're not supposed to be using any sort of device that has geolocation capability on it. However, the data set that the Wall Street Journal got did show some data at this cement factory right up until the moment that the U.S. withdrew from Syria. So this is clearly a problem that's continued even after this policy the DoD put into place a couple of years ago, saying no more geolocation devices, no more location services on your phone. It's hard to police just how many, given the number of devices out there and the number of people in the armed forces, and the fact that many of these devices are personal devices, and some people don't even realize the kind of data that their phones give off. This is a real challenge for the military.
All right, so then what's next? What's being done to protect service members and intelligence officers? Is it something just as simple as turning off location tracking on their phones?
Well, that's a basic first start, but there's no easy solution to this problem, right? Because if you're an intelligence officer and before you go into the CIA, you're living your life openly with a cell phone and with all these commercial apps, and then you suddenly disappear out of this data, well, that in and of itself is suspicious. So no one really has a good answer to how to solve this problem. Yes, for soldiers kind of operating in dangerous environments or on the front lines, the Pentagon policy of don't turn on your location services is a good start. And also, at some point, Congress may need to look at passing a broad, comprehensive privacy law, the kind that Europe's passed and the kind that other countries have passed, to sort of protect the kind of information that comes off people's devices and make sure that it can't be bought or sold without the consumer's knowledge.
So the Wall Street Journal was actually able to obtain location data for mobile devices of U.S. soldiers. Where did that come from, and what did the data actually show?
So I have been reporting on this issue of location tracking and the government's use of it for a while, so I've cultivated some sources in this space. And one of those sources is a company that normally works in the commercial space. So they essentially provide analytics to real estate and investment firms trying to figure out how many phones are in buildings. But they were actually able to pull data from Syria, from this same cement factory that Planet Risk looked at back in 2016, and it showed the same thing. So this was part of my efforts to sort of fact check and look into this myself, and I could see the exact same thing that Planet Risk did, that there were phones that were moving from known U.S. military facilities or facilities in allied countries like the UAE. They would come into this cement factory, spend a couple of months there, and then they would go back to the United States. You could see even the house that they went back to in the United States in some cases. And so this is a pretty invasive data set. It's one that shows a lot of detail and a lot of personal information, and likely the soldier or the military member who whose device it is probably didn't even know that they were broadcasting this data or that it could be obtained.
China banned the export of all data on its citizens, and Europe has laws limiting the way people are monitored through commercial data. But the U.S. is still, has very few protections for its own citizens. Why is digital data so freely available for purchase in America?
Well, in the United States, we've tended to see the internet, the open internet, the ad-supported internet as a good thing. So generally speaking, most of the services that we get online are paid for in some way, shape, or form through digital advertising. And part of digital advertising is collecting data on the behavior of people. But that data has real value in other contexts besides just advertising. And as this incident shows, that it has real military value, it has real intelligence value, and it has the potential to pose a real threat to our soldiers and airmen and service members and intelligence personnel stationed abroad. So this is something that we as a society haven't really quite grappled with. China has broadly limited the export of the kind of data that you can get out of China. That's not to say China is some sort of privacy paradise. They're obviously an authoritarian country that uses a lot of data on their own citizens. But as foreigners trying to get data from China, it's actually very difficult. And something similar happened with Europe with their comprehensive privacy law that went into effect back in 2018. The United States, by and large, has not gone in that direction yet on regulation. But it's something that we may have to consider, and it's something that Congress is going to have to debate in the coming years.
Byron, is part of the reason that we're sort of lagging behind other countries because perhaps a lot of these mega tech companies like an Amazon or a Facebook or Twitter, they're American companies, and maybe lawmakers are just a little more resistant to cracking down on homegrown countries versus other countries?
I think that's part of it, that certainly these tech companies have a huge U.S. presence. Most of them were, in fact, probably all the big ones were founded here by Americans. And historically, the United States has preferred to have a light touch when it comes to regulation, especially of new technologies like the internet. But the privacy kind of consequences of these new technologies are increasingly becoming clear. And it's increasingly a debate that's drawn interest on both sides of the aisle in Congress. It's something that both Republicans and Democrats are interested in some way, shape, or form. There's just a lot of disagreement about the details. So we shall see if indeed Congress moves on a comprehensive privacy bill. But there are certainly discussions underway, and it's something that lawmakers of both parties are thinking about.
Byron Tau, really fascinating article. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.